How's it going, everybody? I'm Drifty from Driftwood Gaming. This is going to be an RPG Maker MV tutorial for how to make a player vendor. This is a custom system that you could put together with mostly eventing and a couple of script calls. A little caveat at the beginning, this is a medium to intermediate tutorial. It's not beginner, it's not super advanced. It'll take maybe 30 minutes of work. The tutorial should be shorter than that though. Another thing, if you have hundreds of items and you want to have hundreds of items in the system, you might want to take the bulk of this system and then change a few key parts and or make a plugin to do this. So if and when I update this system and or make a plugin for it, I'll also make a video tutorial on that. Until, for now, this is a cool little system, especially if you only have like a dozen items or 50 items you could do this for. The more items you have that you want to be interactable with this player vendor, the more copy-paste work it is. The system itself isn't very big, it's pretty short, but as you add each item, you have to add more to it. So let's jump into an example of what it's going to be. This is our player vendor. This is like a little auction house. The player comes here to sell their items to get more than they would from the traveling merchant or from your NPCs. You would go to sell your items to an NPC, and when you go to sell them, let's take this empowering gem. Like I said, you want to sell this. You want to use the vendor for selling like your medium level to high level items to get as much as you can, because there's a timer and it takes a while for the item to actually sell. It's not instant. If you want to get the money instantly, you would sell it to NPC and get the money instantly. And if you want to make more for it, but you don't need it to sell immediately, you would put it up on the player auction house. So if we look at the price that we can get for the empowering gem, the vendor will offer us $1,500 for this empowering gem. Now we could use this to upgrade our weapon, or we can make some money on it early on. It's just irrelevant, right? It's arbitrary. It's just an example. So empowering gem, we can get $1,500 from the traveling merchant. Now you can change the ranges. And I also put in a safety net to stop the player from screwing themselves over, so that they can't sell the item for less than what they would get from the NPC. So if you try to place this on the auction house for less than $1,500, it'll boot it and say, no, sell it to the NPC because you'll get more. So we've also put in some checks and balances. Let's try to sell some stuff, and first let's see ways that we can break the system, or like we have to make sure all of our checks and balances are right. So what if we cancel? Does anything happen? No. What if we say not right now? Nothing happens. Alright, what if we try to sell something and we try to sell this empowering gem, but we try to sell 0 of them for 0? You must be selling at least 1 item to start the auction, okay? Let's try to sell the empowering gem. Let's sell the empowering gem for $50,000. We want $50,000 for one of these. The price is too high, and it would certainly never sell. So lower the asking price. Okay, let's try to sell this for 1 coin. How many we're selling? We got 1. The price is too low. You'd probably make more directly selling it to a merchant. So these are all of our checks and balances, things that the player will try to do to exploit the system. We have to make sure all of our bases are covered. We know that we have to ask at least $1,500 because that's what the vendor will give us, but we can ask up to $3,000 for it because we'll be able to get twice as much, and you can change this if you want. So I recommend copying it exactly like I do and then change it up after it's working the right way. So let's try to get as much as we can. We're going to try to get $3,000 for this empowering gem. How many of these would we like to sell? Did we try to sell more than what we have yet? Let's try to break it again. Let's try to sell 10 of them. Oh, but we don't have that many. Alright, so we know that it'll only let us sell the items that we have, and only within the particular range of what we can get from the NPC and up to double that. So we're going to get as much as we can, 3,000. We only have 1 to sell, so let's see what will happen if all the criteria is met. Are you sure you want to sell it? You can't take it down once the auction is up. Sell my items. Okay, so we place it in the system and a timer starts. We place the empowering gem for an asking price of 3,000 each. We're placing 1 up. When the sale is made, you'll receive the notification. So now we have a little balloon icon popping up saying, hey, you're currently using the player vendor, and this item is being advertised to people. So this item is trying to be sold. You get a little balloon icon showing what item is being sold if you forgot what you placed up there. The item has been removed from your inventory, so we no longer have it. And we can continue to go about our day. We'll go around the town, and the timer, how long you want it to take, I've got a base value of between 2 to 4 minutes. It's randomized slightly. You'll see how I'm doing that with a variable that's being added to 1 to 2 randomly every frame of the game. So we're using this the same way we're handling other timers. It's you can change these numbers so that the auction goes faster or slower, but I recommend, like I said, copying it the same way that I do it, and then once you get it the way you want it, or once you get it copied, you can change it the way you want it. We're going to go about our day. Time keeps ticking away unless we are in the main menu. So time pauses. The switch, all of the common events that are happening are paused while we're in this menu. Also, if we get into a battle, it will pause all of the common event timers, like the farms that we're planting and the timers on the trees and whatnot. So we're going about our day where we can go explore the dungeon. Walking around the dungeon, time is still passing. Only when we're in battle will it actually pause it. We have to remember to eat in my game, but that's irrelevant. You can ignore that. So basically we're waiting around right here. I'm going to fast forward it now until the thing sells. The thing has sold. You got a little notification pop up. Unfortunately, the tax money overrode it really quickly, but it tells you that your amount of items have sold. You can see somebody came up and grabbed that item, and they walk in the town. Once it sells, you get the gab window notification, and somebody walks up and buys it and walks away. All of that is like extra flash that you don't have to have. You don't need to use gab window. You don't need to have a little mini event of somebody walking up to it. You don't need to have this sparkle effect. Like I said, this is all just, my own polish and flair. You take this system and use it however you want. But you can see we got the item, we sold the item and we got the money for that item. We also got a 10% bonus, up to 10%, anywhere from 0 to 10%, based on how much the person who made a bid on your item. So we asked 3,000 and we would have gotten anywhere from 3,000 to 3,300 on that. I didn't quite see because it kind of went by real fast, but that's how the system works. I have another check and balance in that makes it so, since you can sell multiple of the same item, like for example, if we had 10 pickaxes, we can sell all 10 pickaxes, but those are kind of low quality items. You wouldn't want to use this system for a lot of low quality items unless you're just trying to get rid of a lot of stuff. We would check the price of it, of our pickaxe. We can see we get 25 for it, so we can sell the pickaxes. We can sell the pickaxes for double what its base value is. I think we could have got more. The system that I put in, I let the player get up to double its base value, but the NPC only sells at 50% of its base value. So we could have sold the empowering gem for probably 6,000 because it's worth 3,000. The NPC will pay 1,500, and you can double its base value on the auction house. So we could have sold that for more. And you'll see how that works when we jump into the engine. Let's try to sell 10 pickaxes. The NPC will offer 25 for them. The base value is 50, so we should be able to get 100 max. So select the price, 100. How many do we want to sell? We want to sell 10. Are you sure you want to sell them? Boom, they're up for sale. The more the auction goes for, the longer it takes for them to sell. You can see it took those pickaxes. So it'll still take between 2 to 4 minutes no matter what. That's why you want to put like either large quantities of items, or you want to have more expensive items up on the auction house. But if you start getting into 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 of value, it starts adding up more time. So I think at some point it'll take 45 minutes in-game time to sell for like 100 grand if you're trying to make an auction that big. This is just to stop the player from flipping items super quickly and doubling up in 2 minutes, doubling up in 2 minutes, doubling up. And so there's some checks and balances in here. That's enough looking at the system. If you're interested in this system, we're going to jump into the engine and I'll show you how to create it. It's using only plugins that it's using are optional for Gab Window and Show Balloon Icon and stuff like that. So let's jump into it now. Alright, so here's our event. This is the event right here for the move event, and this is an optional. If you want to have a player walk up to the thing and pick it up, you would just set a movement route, a parallel process that would turn off that switch. So you have a switch turn on, item auction buyer, and you turn that off once the player walks up and gets it. It's completely optional. You can skip it. If you do include this, you might want to check through just in case somebody else walks in front of it. It doesn't lock up the game, and it doesn't cause something to go awry. So you set through, and this little side thing, it's like a little bit of polish, unnecessary, but it's a little bit of extra if you want to have. Also the gab window stuff, all optional. So this is the event. It's pretty simple. It looks like a whole lot. If I scroll down, you'll see it's a ton of stuff, but this is because it's copy pasting the same event for like 80 something items. The caveat is if you have a lot of items, you might want to change this up a little bit or wait for the next one if you have like hundreds of items. If you have, I'd say 50 or less, I've got 80, I'm going to add more to it. It shouldn't take too long to do. So I've also commented the event to help you understand what I'm doing and to help myself understand what I'm doing. So right at the top, I'm going to start from the top and we're going to go down to about right here. That's it. So the entire thing is from the top to right there where you see item 2. Boom. So then it just repeats itself. So we'll go over 2 items. The first item to show you the system, and then the second item to show you what you would have to change for each individual item. So at the beginning, we're going to prompt the player to sell an item, do a show text, ask them if they want to sell something, then prompt them with some choices, let them sell stuff, or not right now. When they say when the player decides to actually sell something, we're going to insert a select item. So we'll do a select item, and we're going to create a variable called item selected for sale. I recommend you create these variable names exactly the same, and then change them later once you've got it working. This will be a regular item type, so it's going to prompt the player to pick an item they want to sell. Now we need to check to figure out what item was picked. So we're starting this little contents. For item 1, we've got, this is going to store the data location of the item that was selected into the item selected for sale variable. So we make a conditional branch because this select item is actually controlling a variable, right? It's going to change item selected for sale based on what item the player picked. So if the player picked item number 1, then it will be item selected for sale will be equal to 1. So that's how we know if they picked a pickaxe, then that's going to be this one. So then we're going to say select the price of the first item, and we'll show a text, asking the player for a price, and you can use text codes to make these look better, and you can also use /II item icon to reference the item number. We know this is item number 1, so we can reference item icon number 1 there if we want, or you could type it out. I recommend doing like this, so when you go through to change it for item, you just change the number instead of having to remember what each item is. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of input numbers. The first one is we need to see, well actually the first one is still selecting the price, right? So we're telling the player select the price, and then we're doing an input number. So we need a new variable, item 1, select sell price, and the number of digits is up to you. I've gone with 5 on, so 100K on an item at the most. So if they sell 99 items at 100K each, like there's the limit in there. Moving on, we're going to ask, once the player has put in their price and they've selected an item, we ask how many of those are they selling. So we prompt the player with some text, codes if you want to. Input another number. We need a new variable for this. Item 1, select sell quantity. And like I said, I've done 2 digits here. You can do 1 digit. You can do as many as you want, really. It depends on how many items are the player, how many items you're giving the player. I don't expect the player to have much, be able to sell more than 99 of an item at one time, so that's why I limited it to that. Make sure the player has that many items now, so we have to do some checks and balances so the player is not... if the player is able to exploit your system, the player isn't cheating, you failed to stop the player from playing the way that's intended. So you have to handle all this. You can't expect the player to not abuse the system to manipulate it and make the game easy, because if the game gives you these options, the player is going to use those options to cheat their way through the game. So you have to make the system so that they can't cheat. Control variable, item 1 quantity check. We're going to create a new variable, and we're going to set it to the number of the type of item that the player has picked. So remember, in this first selection, we know that the player picked the item number 1. And what is item number 1? Well, it's the first item in your database. So you go to your items tab and you see that whatever item is there. So you just set it to the item number 1. Everything is 1. Item icon 1, item selected is 1. In this case, my first item in my items JSON in the database is a pickaxe. So we're controlling the new variable item 1 quant check to be the number of pickaxes the player currently has. So now we need to do some logic. We're going to do a conditional branch. We're going to say if item 1 quantity check is greater than equal to another variable, the item 01 select cell quantity variable. So we're comparing. We're making sure that the player has more than at least the same amount or more of the item they selected. So if they try to sell 3 but they only have 2, it won't work right there. So what we're going to do here is also have an else handler on that. We have an else handler on that. And this one says, on that else handler, you're going to say you don't have that many. So if they try to sell more than they have, we let the player know they don't have that many. All right, we have to do another check and balance. We have to make sure that the quantity they're trying to sell is not 0. So we have an else handler on this. We make a conditional branch underneath there. Item 01 select cell quantity greater than 0. So the else handler on that one is basically going to say you must be selling at least 1 to start an auction. Otherwise the auction will start and it'll time everything, and at the end of it nothing will happen. It'll just stop you from using it because you're selling 0 of an item. So we have an else handler on that to stop the player from just kind of like wasting its own time right there. We want to stop the player from screwing itself or exploiting the game. Screwing the player themselves or exploiting the game. So if they've gone past this, we know that they're selling the same amount or they're selling an amount that's a valid number, a non-zero number. We're going to move on to the next thing. We kind of want the player to not sell the item for too little or for too much. So the amount that I've selected is the player cannot sell it for less than 50% of its base value and no more than double of its base value. Now keep in mind, my NPCs will pay 50% for all the items. So if your NPCs pay more than half of the base value when you're selling an item, you might want to raise this from 50% to whatever your NPCs will buy it for. That way the player doesn't screw themselves. And if you want the player to be able to make more on this system, you can raise it from 200% to 300% or whatever you want. It's up to you. 50% to 200% of its base value is that the vendor will accept. Once you've determined your parameters, your range that the player will sell, we do a script call. This is probably the main script call in here. We're going to declare 4 variables. The first one is going to be base price, so variable base price equals $data items 1 dot price. Now this number will change for each item, so when we copy paste this entire block of code for the next item, we're going to change this, but for now it's the 1 because we're on the first item of the database. The next variable that we're declaring is called price select. We're setting that to game variables dot value of, now 110 is for me, but you need to look back on and see what you're using for the price select. So when I scroll up, I'm going to see the variables I'm using. So I'm going to find price select. So here is my price select. This is when the player selects the price of the first item. I'm using item 1 select cell price. This is variable 110. So whatever variable you used for select the price of your item, that's the next thing you're going to put in. You're going to select that you're going to set that to game variables dot value right here. So this number will be different for you depending on what you put in for that variable, what variable number you picked. The next temporary variable we create is called 50% of base. You can change these names if you want, but like I said, I recommend you leave them the same and then change them after everything's working and you've tested it. So what we're doing here is we're setting the base price of an item. We're creating a temporary variable and we're assigning it a value. This is where remember why I asked you to select your parameters. 50% to 200% is what I picked. If you're going to go with, say, like, well, the NPC buys the items back from the player at 75% of the base value, then you would change this to 0.75. But in my game, the NPC buys items back at 50% of their value. so I'm putting this at 0.5. This is where you would change that. The next one, you can see it's the same thing. I'm calling it double base price and base price times 2. If you want them to make 3 times, or you want them to be able to sell an item for 3 times its value, you would change the 2 to a 3, and it's as simple as that. Now we're going to do some checks to make sure that the player has selected the right number, a number that's within the boundaries of your range. So we're going to use a couple of switches. I'm using switch 111 and 112. You can use whatever 2 switches you want. Just remember which switches you're using for these. So if price select is greater than or equal to 50% of base, that's this one, then we're going to turn on a switch, $GameSwitches.set value of the next switch to true. And then we're going to say if price select is less than or equal to double base price, then we're turning on the next switch, GameSwitches.set value 112 to true. Now, the only thing you need to remember these for is at the end of this event, after it is started and we've accepted the item and the timer has started and the item is up for sale, we need to turn these switches off so that when we sell the next item, these switches aren't automatically on and then the player can break the system. They sell one item for a correct price and then they sell the next item for an incorrect price. A lot of this stuff is just to stop the player from exploiting the system. So that's like the main script call, right? Okay, then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of conditionals. We need to see if item 1 price high enough is on. So we create a new variable if you don't already have it. Item 01 price high enough is on. That is going to be the variable of 111. That's the one we created here. So if this switch is on, we know they selected a price that's high enough. Then inside that conditional, we do the same thing. On both of these, we do an else branch. I'll show you those in a second. So this one is, I've called it item 1 price low enough is on, and that's the 112 to make sure that they've selected something that's below 200%. Then we're going to ask for the confirmation to make sure the player is ready to sell their item. They've selected the item they want to sell. They've selected the price. They've selected how many of them they want to sell. We've done all the checks and balances to make sure that the price and everything is valid. Then we say, are you sure you want to sell that item? Because once we start the system, there's no way to pause it or undo it, and the item will be consumed in the process. So we let the player know that you can't remove it once you place it, and then we just show choice, yes or no. If either of these two is not met, the price high enough, price low enough, you're just going to show a text. So let's go down right here. The price seems to be a bit too low. You probably try directly selling it to a merchant, or the price is too high. You probably never sell. Try lowering the price. When the player says no, they're sure they want to wait, then nothing happens and the system ends and no items are consumed. But if the player says yes, sell my items, here's where it finishes the event and goes into the common event. So at this point, we're going to remove the items from the player and track all of that data that we aggregated. So we're going to play sound effects. This is a flash. You can play whatever sound effect you want. We need to change item, and we're going to subtract pickaxe, but we're not going to select a specific number because we let the player determine how many they want to sell. So we're going to change items by decreasing by the variable item 1 select sell quantity. And then we're going to give a text pop-up to let the player know what's going on here. So we're going to say, you've placed up variable, for me it's 111, this number of items, item 1, up for sale, with an asking price of, right here, the icon 832 is the icon I'm using for gold, and then the variable 110 is the variable that the price that they're asking. So this is the quantity, and then this is the price variables. These will be different for you. Most of this will be exactly the same, but the numbers of variables you're using might be different. If you're not already using 100s in the 100s, you might want to just use exactly the same variables because it'll make it easier for you to understand, well, what does 111 mean? What does 110 mean? This is the quantity that's being selected, and this is the price that's being selected. When the sale is made, you'll receive a notification. Now, you can remove that little notification of a notification if you want to, if you're not using the gab window or other show text and stuff like that. So now what we're going to do is start the common event. And the common event is, like I said, it looks large like this event, but it's very small because there's a lot of optional things that you don't have to do in it. So then we're going to turn on the timer. So we're going to create a new switch called it Item Auction 01 Timer, turn that on. And then when they say not yet, of course nothing else happens. Now, this is all for the first item, right? If we scroll down, it ends, all of these checks and balances happen, and then what you're going to do is from everywhere up to item 1, because the player's going to select an item. So what you do is if you take the comments exactly, then you're going to start at this conditional branch, or you're going to copy right here. And you'll just copy everything up until you get to the point where you're on the next item, so at the end of your event. Right-click this entire chunk right there and paste it underneath itself. Now we're going to go through this. It's not going to happen twice once you change it, right? So we're going to go through, here's what we would change. All instances of the first item in the database being changed to the second. So the first conditional branch from =1 will be changed to =2. Scrolling down, you'll change this item icon from 1 to 2. Scrolling down, what else would be changed? Right, this is all the same, this is the same, this is the same, everything is the same. Here's something else that you would have to change. Inside of the data items, now we're looking at the price of data items 2, not 1. The rest of it stays the same. We scroll down some more. We're going to change this text right here from item icon 1 to item icon 2. In case I missed anything, anytime you're referencing the first item, for each new item, you're changing it to reference the next item in your database. So it will always be like from 1 to 2 in this case. Also, when you're changing items here, it won't be item 1 anymore. You'll be decreasing item 2 by the same variable, though. Item 1 selected, cell quantity. Most of the variables stay the same, though. So you don't have to change anything else like that. It's just like right here, you would change item icon 1 to 2, etc. And that's it. There's really no difference. You're still using variables 111 and 110, and even though it says item 1 select cell quantity, that's for the first item that's being sold, not the first item in the database. Hopefully that makes sense. It doesn't seem too complicated, but like I can see with somebody else's system, you have to understand somebody else's process of thinking. It can be confusing, and if you have any questions, let me know on the Discord or on the YouTube comments. Anyway, you copy paste the same thing and you call it item 3, and you do the same thing. I don't need to go through it all again, but all instances of item 2, item icon 2, you change to 3, so forth, so on, right? And you do that until you have all of your items. It's not quite done yet because you have to do some things at the end of it. So at the end of it, once you've gone through all of your items, here's some things that have to happen. So this is the last item. Item 84 for me. I'll be adding more though. You're going to do a comment. You don't have to do the comments, but what we're going to do here is we're going to add some extra delay for big ticket auctions. This is the checks and balance to make it take longer if they're selling something that's above a certain value, right? So if they're selling like 10 items and they're all worth like 50,000, we want it to take a little bit longer than 2 to 4 minutes. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to control a variable, the item 1 sold value. We're going to set it to the item 1 select sell price. Don't forget to do these. Then we're going to take the item 1 sold value and multiply it by the item 1 select sell quantity. So we're going to take the price and multiply by the quantity. So if they are selling 10 of this item at 100, the value of the item 1 sold value will be it'll add up and multiply, right? You set it and then you multiply it. So you'll have 1,000 for that value that we're returning back to the player. You can ignore some of these comments. Control variable, item 1 select sell price, back to 0. I'm doing this, I think, as a fail-safe. I would recommend do this. Control variable, item 1 select sell price, back to 0. So we're changing the sell price back to 0 because we've already taken the values of those. But you have to do this first. We've already taken the value of sell price and multiplied it by the quantity. After we've taken that information and put it into the total sold value, we can set that back to 0 for the next time around. Now we need to add a way to increase the payout by 0 to 10% of the asking price because this is an auction after all. So we're going to do a little script call in here, and we're going to create a variable called auction bonus. Game variables.value. Now 114 is the item 1 sold value that we assigned our values. 100
gold per pickaxe, and we're selling 10 pickaxes. That's 1,000. So this is the item 1 sold value number. It'll be whatever number you put that variable in for. So this is that. And we're going to multiply that by 1 plus math.random divided by 10. And then we're going to assign that variable, item 1 sold value, the value of that temporary variable auction bonus. If you don't understand what's going on, just try to copy paste it verbatim and then look at it later, and it shouldn't be too complicated once you get a grasp for how it works. So the next part, what we're going to do is make sure it takes longer for higher ticket items. If item 1 sold value is greater than 100,000, then we're going to control a variable of 115. It'll be a different number for you. We're going to control the variable of item 1 sold time remaining. There's lots of variables in here. So create a new variable, item 1 sold time remaining, and we're going to set this to 144,000. These are numbers that I've picked and time that I think it should take. If you want to know what this number is representing, it's the number of frames that have to pass for the item to finally sell. So if the total sold value is greater than 100 grand, make sure that 144,000 frames have to pass, or at least the variable goes up to 144, because the timer can be 1 or 2, so it could still be anywhere in between 77,000 to 144,000. Or 67,000. What is it? No, 142,000. No, 100 and... What's half of that? 72? 72. 72,000. Math is hard, guys. On the else handler here, because this is going to have an else handler. On the else handler, if the item sold value is greater than or equal to 50,000, if the total value returning is over 50 grand, then we're changing item 1 sold time remaining to 72,000. And then else handler, if it's over 25,000, feel free to change these numbers if you want. The first number, the conditional item sold value, is the amount of money the player is going to get, and the second thing is how many frames, how much has to be added to the variable. So it could be anywhere from 18,000 to 36,000 depending on the timer that's adding 1 to 2 randomly. I'm trying to make this simple, guys. I'm trying to make it simple. Else handler, just copy it the same and then change it later. Item 1 sold value greater than or equal to 12,500, then control the variable item 1 sold time remaining 18,000. Else handler, we're just setting it to 14,400. So this will be, I think, 3 minutes or so, depending, right? And you could take your calculator if you wanted to and divide it by 60. So 14,400 divided by 60, that's 240 seconds divided by 60, 4 minutes. So at the most, this item will take 4 minutes, but we're adding 1 to 2 randomly on the timer, so you divide this by 2, and you have 2. So the bare minimum amount of time for the auction house to work will be between 2 minutes to 4 minutes. And you can change all this as you want, but it'll go up from 20 to 40 minutes, basically, if you're going to get a return of 100 grand or more. Okay, so this next part is also mandatory. You have to turn off switches. Otherwise, the player will be able to sell an item the first time, that's legit, and then the second time they'll be able to sell it for more than or less than what it's actually worth. So we have to turn off those 111 and 112 switches that we're looking at inside that big script call. So turn off item 1 priced high enough, and turn off item 1 priced low enough. And then, one more control variables, whatever you use for item auction walk time, set it equal to item 1 sold time remaining. I'm not sure what the point of that one is for, item auction walk time. I'm not sure what I did that for. I'm not sure what this is for, I don't remember. But just do it anyway. Make a new variable if you don't already have it, item auction walk time, and set it to the item 1 sold time remaining. We'll figure it out later. Okay, on the next page, this next page is going to have, come on, don't lag on me, oh my god. This next page is going to have a condition. They're both action button.
This one is going to have item auction 01 timer. So whatever number you use for that. So once the timer is on and things are running, if you interact with this event, again, all it's going to do is tell the player there's already an auction taking place right here. And you can add more stuff to let the player know what item is being sold, the price that they included. You can add whatever you want more here, but basically this is just to say, hey, you can't interact with the system because it's currently being... it's currently already has an item up for sale. Like your item slot is currently used. And that's it. So we've turned the timer on at the end of this whole event inside of when the player confirms they want to sell something. We take the item, we tell them what's going to happen, and we turn the timer on. And then once this timer turns on, it switches to this page, and the common event starts. So that's the bulk of it. Here's the common event that actually handles the timer. We're going to make a common event, call it item 01 auction. The trigger will be parallel, and the switch is the one we turn on when the player confirms. So this is the item auction 01 timer. Also, it's the same switch that toggles the first page to the second page of the event. And here's the bulk of it. It looks long, it's not long, it's very short. So the only thing that looks long is because I'm doing balloon icons, and I'll show you that in a second. So starting off, we control a variable, item 01 auction timer, and we're going to add this. We're going to set this to add to its current value by adding a random 1 to 2 to it. Now you can change this if you want, but then you might want to look at your other timers at the end. Just keep it the same and change it later on. If player map ID equals 3, now this is something else that I'm using. So I'm using a player tracker, and I've gone over this player tracker a lot, but I think it's only relevant since I'm talking about it here. I have to show it off. The player tracker is just a way for me to figure out where the player's at and what's happening with all of the data on the player. What map is he on, what or she, the X and the Y at all points. So a player tracker is just a parallel process event. You can use this little event for many systems, and it helps you control things. And what you want to do is turn on a switch at the beginning of the game in your initialization event. So turn on a switch player tracker, and then this event is always running. It's going to set a variable player X to the map X of the player, player Y to the map Y of the player, player map ID to the map ID, so we know what the X location, the Y location, and the map that the player is on at every frame of the game. And optionally, you can add a region, so you know what region the player's in. So we're setting get location info using the player region ID as the name of the variable, and we're selecting region ID, and the X, Y, the two values we're selecting are the current player's X and Y. You want to put this at the beneath these two if you're also checking for what region. So there's our player tracker. Once again, that's optional stuff. So if you have a player tracker and you want to show balloon icons, here's the method of doing it. Make sure that the player is on the right map, and if they are on a right map, we're going to do a script call. Here's where we use modulus. To be honest, this is the only time I've ever had to use modulus. We're going to use a script call, and we're going to say if the game variables.value 113 is the timer, so we're referencing the timer, whatever you use for the timer, that's there. Modulus of 100 is equal to 1. Whenever you divide the value of the timer by 100 and you're left with 1, then it will show a balloon icon. So when the timer is at 101, 201, 301, 401, so this is like every second and a half, approximately. This is just a rough way of doing it. It works just fine, so you can do it that way, or you can skip this entire thing. So this will trigger at that every between 1.5 seconds, and then we're gonna see what item did the player put up for sale. So we do a conditional branch, no else handler is needed here, just seeing if they're selling the first item. Well, we know the first item in the database is a pickaxe, so we would look at our items, pickaxe, and we would look at the icon that's being used. So we go back to the common event, we know that's 216, and then we're going to do a plugin command using Gamfly's balloon icon pop-ups. We're going to use show icon balloon, the icon of 216 on event number, whatever event you're using for your player auction. So if I look right here, I can see that this is event ID 65. So I'm going to say play that balloon on this event using this icon, right? And then we copy paste that, we change the icon for the second
to be the second item, and the event stays the same. Now you don't have to do this. This is only if you want to show balloon icons. Otherwise, you skip this entire section. That's it. You skip all of that if you don't want balloon icons. All of that's for balloon icons. There is a better way to do this, and when I get it down and working, then I will update this and do another shorter, quicker, here, use this plugin to do it type of thing. Or I will go through it evented and just have a better script call for that. Feel free to improve on this and make it better than what it actually is and more optimized. So if you decide to not do balloon icons, then all you're doing is this first thing, the timer, and then you jump to here, the second thing. If the item 1 auction timer is greater than or equal to the item 1 sold time remaining, then we're going to control a switch and we're going to say item auction buyer is on. Then we're going to change the gold and we're going to set this to the variable whatever you use for item 1 sold value by increasing it. So this is for me, I'm using 114, but this is the value that is the item's price, come on brain, times the quantity plus the random 0 to 10%. And that's going to award that value in gold to the player. Then if you're using gab text, gab pop-ups, you don't, like I said, this is optional, you don't have to do this, but if you are, you can do that here, and you can say you sold the 111 for me is the quantity, and then the item icon using variable 100. We're referencing a variable inside of an item icon. So variable 100 is the item that was selected, right? So the quantity of the item, this is the item that was selected, has sold for, this is an icon for your gold, and then this is the total value that you got at the end. This is the same amount, the variable 114 is how much the sold value, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Everything's there. Play a sound effect if you want, force gab so that shows. Then we have to do a couple things. Control a variable, item 1 auction timer, set it back to 0, and also remember to turn off the timer. So we set the value of the timer back to 0, and we turn off the switch that controls this parallel process. So the timer stops when there's nothing sold. You don't want a parallel process running with nothing happening. So we turn off that switch as well, and the parallel stops. That's it. That's the whole thing. There's 3 optionals. There's the balloon icon, which is a huge optional, the gab text, which is a small optional, and then there's another event that has somebody walk up and it just looks like he's grabbing something off the table and walking back out of town. That's an optional. So you got 3 optionals, and that's the bulk of the system. That's it for this tutorial, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. That is the player vendor system, a way to let the player make more for their items if they don't mind waiting to sell that particular item, so they don't have to NPC everything at half value. It's malleable. You can change it to your heart's content. I would recommend you copy it exactly, even use the same variables unless you're already using those variables for something else, in which case just maybe add 100, you know, so if you're already using 100 and 114 and all those, you can go to 214. And so every time you see an instance of a variable 114, you can use 214. It'll help you stay organized, but do it however you want. If you have any questions, please hit me up on the Discord, links in the description below. Leave in a YouTube comment and a thumbs up, which is always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Thank you so much for the support on the GoFundMe. You guys have done a fantastic job, and I feel so loved. You guys are amazing. That's why I do these free tutorials. Thank you guys so much. We love you. I love you very much. Hope to see you on the Discord, and hope you enjoy this tutorial. Bye-bye.